I got asked a question in the comments. Do I feed my plants? Of course I feed my plants. Otherwise, I wouldn't get harvests like this. Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener channel, from our garden here in Norfolk in the UK. Now, I shall answer the question about feeding our plants, so do stay tuned. But why no dig? Well, if we rewind the clock back to towards the end of 2019, I was struggling to get all of these plots dug because we used to turn our soil over back then, and we garden on heavy clay, and I think that November and December and January we had lots of frost, lots of rain, and by the time we got to March I had 5 of these 14 by 12 beds to dig.
All on your own, because I can't ever help you with that, can I? Or I couldn't ever help you with that.
And it was given ever more difficult. And then, of course, in 2020 we went into lockdown when COVID hit. And I guess like most of you, there I was at home with Mrs. W. We were watching more YouTube, and we came across a guy called Charles Dowding. And I remember after watching 2 or 3 of his videos, and I said to Mrs. W, hey, you need to come and watch this. I think this is for us. I really do. It will save all that digging, because according to Charles, it's not great to dig your soil anyway. And I actually don't like digging all this. Mrs. W sort of looked at me and said, you're just trying to get away with digging the plots, aren't you? Yeah, but I knew we were onto something. And the more we watched, Mrs. W was watching along with me, and she said, actually, it does sound rather good, doesn't it? Then we ran into a problem. Because we'd been locked down during COVID, everybody was at home and everybody was ordering compost, and it was extremely limited. Also, I was thinking to myself, well, this sounds too good to be true. I can grow all these vegetables, great vegetables, and flowers, and shrubs, and trees, and I don't have to do a single piece of digging. So we decided between ourselves that during that year we would turn what we now know as plot 4 and plot 1 into no dig beds. And we actually thought, after growing that year, that it was fantastic. Our harvests were huge. And if you just look at each of our beds now and just see how abundant they are. This is plot 1. And in here we have celery, celeriac. Now they're long-term growing plants. They are in the ground for quite a long time. But then next door to that, we actually have calabrese and red cabbage. They're second plantings. We also have next door to that purple sprouting broccoli. And again, they're second planting. There were onions in there earlier this year. And this is something actually quite fantastic, because before we were no dig, we really struggled to grow a second crop in any of these beds. I don't know if many of you know what clay soil is. Maybe you don't have it, so you don't know how difficult it is to work with. But all I can tell you is that in the winter, when the rains come, it's like mud. It's like walking on mud pies, isn't it, Mrs. W?
And it sticks to your boots, doesn't it?
Oh.
And you end up with big clods of stuff on your shoes.
You take it everywhere.
Yeah.
Mrs. W has always got a mop in her hand in the kitchen as I walk back in. But during the summer months, the effect is that clay soil bakes really hard. Really, really hard. You can't even get a fork into it, or a trowel, or anything to try and plant something. And we would have to try and rush and maybe harvest some of our crops earlier than perhaps they should be, so that maybe during the early part of June, when we could still get a fork or a trowel into the ground, we could possibly get another planting. Then the problem comes is, how do you water them? Because during those really hot months that we get in the UK of July, August, it's so hard that when you water, the water just runs off.
Yeah.
You can't get the water down to the roots. You'd have to be getting a hoe and chipping away at the soil to hopefully try and aerate it a bit so that water would go down. So in plot 2, we have some overwintering cauliflowers and cabbage that are growing away. And you can see by the compost that's here, I can plant things in there anytime I want, at any time of the year. Compost also means that when it rains, the water is absorbed by the compost and can then drain down into the soil without evaporating. Just behind Mrs. W, you can see our wonderful squash. No Dig has provided plenty of nutrients that can actually fuel these plants to give us this harvest. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a bit, because there's a little one around here, isn't there?
Yeah.
So yeah, No Dig really works. We've got beetroot there. That's a second planting. We had spring onions in there before, or salad onions, as some of you might know them as. In this bed here, we had broad beans. We had a wonderful harvest of broad beans, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Or some of you might know them as fava beans. You can see the sprouts have grown really well. We've actually got sprouts on the plant. The kale has grown really well. And what does No Dig mean to us? Well, it means that we don't ever turn the soil over. It's never inverted. But as you can see, I do have a fork in my hand, and I still have a use for forks. Because another question I'm often asked is, well, the ground's going to become very compact. And how are you ever going to grow things like parsnips or carrots? Well, today is October the 6th, so we're well into autumn, and I have a parsnip here, and all I do with a fork is just sink it down into the ground and just loosen the soil around it.
Oh, I think I heard something then.
Yes, I think I heard the roots snap. And it's a question of harvesting that parsnip.
Oh my goodness! That's massive.
See where it's snapped?
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah,
So we've been going down a lot further. There's a lot of food there.
I don't think we've had such a big parsnip.
So yes, you can grow root vegetables, even parsnips, that go down even further than carrots.
Well, that's a good sort of 30 centimetres long, I would say that one is. Foot long, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we've obviously broken the end off, so...
Now, we're by certainly no means into growing huge vegetables. Our vegetables are for us to eat. But it just goes to show you just how you can grow things like this in No Dig. Actually, next door are our leeks. And these are another one where I just need to use the fork. And again, it's just going down, and you can see how easily that's going in. I would have never have done that.
No,
had we
in the
not
clay
been No
soil.
Dig.
No.
It simply would not have happened. And it's just, as I say, just disturbing it, just loosen it around the leek, and that enables me to then be able to pull that up.
Superb.
Now, I know some people that are No Dig, actually, they multi-sow their leeks. We don't particularly like doing that, do we? Because we do like the nice white shank.
Yeah. That's another thing also, just filming you there, Barry. We always push the soil back down if we've had to disturb the soil to harvest something, we always put our foot back down to press it back down, don't we?
Oh, yes. And another myth is that some people will say, if you are No Dig, you don't get any weeds. Well, let me tell you, you do. But they do come out very, very easily. It's nothing to eat for you, Poppy, it's a weed. I know. I know.
Crazy dog.
So there are just one or two about here, and all we need to do is to just pull those out so that they can't flower and won't produce any more.
Compared to how many weeds we used to get in the garden, and also the inability to then remove them easily because you couldn't just pull them like you can these ones.
No.
You had to dig them out with the trowel, and
You did
because
indeed.
the soil just became so hard, didn't it, in the summer? Yeah.
The other thing I can see here is the fungi that continually pop up.
Little baby ones.
Yeah, and that'll be to do with our compost, and we've got some woody content, as you can see. There's some bits of wood here that still haven't broken down, but they actually do quite like that. And actually, it's a really good sign if you're seeing that. It means that No Dig is actually working. No Dig is not just for outside. It works undercover in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. Look at these wonderful things that we still have to harvest, and we've had plenty out of this greenhouse. All those amazing chilies, peppers. We've had some great harvests of tomatoes, and we've got just a few more to pick now before we get toward the end of October.
On the board behind you also, we had a really good harvest of Cassandra cucumbers.
29 cucumbers, wasn't it?
From 2 plants.
So back to that question. Do you feed your plants? Yes, I do. We're No Dig, so it's compost. And this is our compost that we've made. And we try to make as much of this compost as we can, because we don't really want to be spending money on bringing other compost in. And that's solely what feeds the outside beds. They receive no other feed. They get a dressing of that round about this time of year, and during November and December as the beds become free, and that's enough to power the growth of those vegetables that we've been looking at. 2 plantings, sometimes 3. Now you can see that this compost is far from fine compost that you'd normally sort of think about as compost, but it doesn't matter with No Dig. That's good enough. And then what I need to do is just to prep this bed here, and that's because in the polytunnel I have some winter greens that I want to plant in here. Great vegetable to grow because I'll be in this strip of land here for, they're probably ready round about sort of February, March time, and they'll be out before I need to put something else in here at the beginning of the new season. And all I do is just spread this about. I'm using my manure fork here, but you could be using a rake. And just giving it a sort of 1 inch or so top dressing of compost. And that's all we shall do to this. Nothing else. Just pop the plants in, they'll grow away. We'll have some nice spring greens round about February, March time next year. And then the other great thing about No Dig is that we'll be able to twist those out and use them as and when we want. And whatever is going in here after that, even on the same day, the new plantings can go straight in. There will be no need to put any more compost on here. This is enough until we get back to this time in 2024. Now, when it comes to the undercover growing, we do give a comfrey feed. We also make some nettle feed, don't we?
We do.
It's quite intensive within the greenhouse and in the polytunnel. And I always think they just need that little bit of extra help. And that just helps those plants that are in there. They're quite close together. And of course, they don't have the luxury of getting their roots down into the outside plots like the other vegetables do to find all those amazing nutrients. So that's the only other thing that we do. Now, you don't have to be No Dig to grow vegetables, but I believe in it, and I think it's a great way to grow your vegetables. If you look behind me, there is woodland. And actually, if you walk through woodland and you actually just stoop down to the floor and feel the soil, it feels absolutely amazing. Nature has done that. It's the decay of whatever's growing there, the leaves that fall. And let's face it, before we all turned to gardening and growing our own vegetables, Mother Nature took care of the soil very well. And No Dig really is just a replication of that, only we're making compost and putting it on there for them. So we're using the leaves that are left behind once we've had the harvest, the stalks, the grass that I mow, the chicken manure when we clean the chickens out.
The peelings from the kitchen.
The peelings from the kitchens, yes. The vegetation that we get delivered from the local gardener that I shred down and mix with it so we got some good brown, to coffee grounds that we might need to use during December and January before the grass starts to grow again. All of that is composted and helps us to replicate exactly what nature does. And as you've seen in today's video, there is an abundance of growth. And if you look back on our channel at the garden tours, the harvests, there's an absolute abundance. So for us, No Dig wins, hands down.
Definitely.
We won't ever go back to turning this soil over. We will be No Dig for the rest of our gardening lives. You may already be No Dig, and if you are, please leave your comments in the comments section and let us know what you think of it. How do you view No Dig? If you're just starting out in gardening, or you're an experienced gardener and on the brink of maybe going over to No Dig, then I hope that this has helped you understand just how it works and just how great it all really is. frees up your time to be able to do all the other lovely things like harvesting, getting jobs done. For me, usually Mrs. W has quite a long list. Gone are those days, Mrs. W, when we used to have to come out here and spend half a day or more weeding just one bed so that we could either get the harvest or plant something.
Yeah. It was, don't get me wrong, I've always loved gardening all of my life. I was brought up with gardening and everything, but when I look back on it now, I think about why on earth did I not do this so much earlier in my life? If I'd known about it, I would have.
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. If you do like what we do, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and do subscribe. We would love you to be a part of our journey. Next year we go into our 4th year of No Dig.
Yeah.
And do go and look on our channel because we have made videos on how to make a No Dig bed. And we will have a video coming out pretty soon on just how we make compost. So do stay tuned. Do have a great gardening week, and we shall see you next time.